Hello and welcome to day 84 of the Not Alone Today Chronological Bible Reading Plan with Joseph and Anu. Today we'll be reading 1 Samuel 13 to 16 using the New International Version UK.
Chapter 13. Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years.
Saul chose 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah in Benjamin. The rest of the men is sent back to their homes.
Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost at Geba, and the Philistines heard about it. Then Saul had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." So all Israel heard the news. Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost, and now Israel has become obnoxious to the Philistines. And the people were summoned to join Saul at Gilgal.
The Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Michmash, east of Beth Haven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard-pressed, they hid in caves and thickets, among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead.
Saul remained at Gilgal, and all the troops with him were quaking with fear. He waited for 7 days, the time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and Saul's men began to scatter. So he said, "Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings." And Saul offered up the burnt offering. Just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrived, and Saul went out to greet him.
"What have you done?" asked Samuel.
Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering."
"You have done a foolish thing," Samuel said. "You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command."
Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah in Benjamin. And Saul counted the men who were with him. They numbered about 600.
Saul and his son Jonathan and the men with him were staying in Gibeah of Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. Raiding parties went out from the Philistine camp in 3 detachments. One turned towards Ophrah in the vicinity of Shual, another towards Beth Horon, and the third towards the borderline overlooking the valley of Zeboyim, facing the wilderness.
Not a blacksmith could be found in the whole land of Israel, because the Philistines had said, "Otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears." So all Israel went down to the Philistines to have their plowshares, mattocks, axes, and sickles sharpened. The price was 2/3 of a shekel for sharpening plowshares and mattocks, and 1/3 of a shekel for sharpening forks and axes, and for repointing gourds.
So on the day of the battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or a spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them.
Chapter 14. Now a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass at Michmash. One day Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father.
Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was a son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left.
On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez and the other Seneh. One cliff stood to the north towards Michmash, the other to the south towards Geba.
Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few."
Do all that you have in mind, his armor-bearer said. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul.
Jonathan said, "Come on then, we will cross over towards them and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait there until we come to you,' we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands."
So both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. "Look," said the Philistines, "the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor-bearer, "Come up to us, and we'll teach you a lesson."
So Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel."
Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet, with his armor-bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor-bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half an acre.
Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outpost and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God.
Saul's lookouts at Gibeah in Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, "Muster the forces and see who has left us." When they did, it was Jonathan and his armor-bearer who were not there.
Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ark of God." At that time, it was with the Israelites. While Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, "Withdraw your hand."
Then Saul and all his men assembled and went to the battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines and had gone up with them to their camp went over to the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. So on that day, the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved on beyond Beth-aven.
Now, the Israelites were in distress that day, because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself of my enemies." So none of the troops tasted food.
The entire army entered the woods, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth, because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had bound the people with the oath. So he reached out the end of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, "Your father bound the army under a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats food today.' That is why the men are faint."
Jonathan said, "My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of this honey. How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater?"
That day, after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, they were exhausted. They pounced on the plunder, and taking sheep, cattle, and calves, they butchered them on the ground and ate them, together with the blood. Then someone said to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it."
"You have broken faith," he said. "Roll a large stone over here at once." Then he said, "Go out among the men and tell them, 'Each of you bring me your cattle and sheep, and slaughter them here and eat them. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it.'"
So everyone brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had done this.
Saul said, "Let us go down and pursue the Philistines by night and plunder them till dawn, and let us not leave one of them alive."
"Do whatever seems best to you," they replied.
But the priest said, "Let us inquire of God here."
So Saul asked God, "Shall I go down and pursue the Philistines? Will you give them into Israel's hands?" But God did not answer him that day.
Saul therefore said, "Come here, all of you who are leaders of the army." out and let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord who rescues Israel lives, even if the guilt lies with my son Jonathan, he must die." But not one of them said a word.
Saul then said to all the Israelites, "You stand over there. I and Jonathan my son will stand over here."
"Do what seems best to you," they replied.
Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, "Why have you not answered your servants today? If the fault is in me or my son Jonathan, respond with Urim. But if the men of Israel are at fault, respond with Thummim." Jonathan and son were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. Saul said, "Cast the lot between me and Jonathan my son." And Jonathan was taken.
Then Saul said to Jonathan, "Tell me what you have done."
So Jonathan told him, "I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die."
Saul said, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan."
But the men said to Saul, "Should Jonathan die? He who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never! As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he did this today with God's help." So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death.
Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land.
After Saul had assumed rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side: Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zobah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites, delivering Israel from the hands of those who had plundered them.
Saul's sons were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Malchishua. The name of his elder daughter was Merab, and that of the younger was Michal. His wife's name was Ahinoam, daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of Saul's army was Abner, son of Ner, and Ner was Saul's uncle. Saul's father, Kish, and Abner's father, Ner, were sons of Abiel.
All the days of Saul there was bitter war with the Philistines, and whenever Saul saw a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service.
Chapter 15. Samuel said to Saul, "I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys."
So Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 from Judah. Saul went to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the ravine. Then he said to the Kenites, "Go away, leave the Amalekites so that I do not destroy you along with them. For you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt." So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites.
Then Saul attacked Amalekites all the way from Avila to Shur, near the eastern border of Egypt. He took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and all his people he totally destroyed with the sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag, and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed.
Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. "I regret that I have made Saul king because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions." Samuel was angry, and he cried out to the Lord all that night.
Early in the morning, Samuel got up and went to meet Saul, but he was told, "Saul has gone to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor and has turned and gone on to Gilgal."
When Samuel reached him, Saul said, "The Lord bless you. I have carried out the Lord's instructions."
But Samuel said, "What then is this bleating of sheep in my ears? What is this lowing of cattle that I hear?"
Saul answered, "The soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but we totally destroyed the rest."
"Enough," Samuel said to Saul, "Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night."
Tell me, Saul replied.
Samuel said, "Although you were once small in your own eyes, did you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel, and he sent you on a mission, saying, 'Go and completely destroy those wicked people, the Amalekites. Wage war against them until you have wiped them out.' Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord?"
But I did obey the Lord, Saul said. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag their king. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal.
But Samuel replied, "Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king."
Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions. I was afraid of the men, and so I gave in to them. Now I beg you, forgive my sin and come back with me, so that I may worship the Lord.
But Samuel said to him, "I will not go back with you. You have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you as king over Israel."
As Samuel turned to leave, Saul caught hold of the hem of his robe, and it tore. Samuel said to him, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to one of your neighbors, to one better than you. He who is the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he is not a human being that he should change his mind."
Saul replied, "I have sinned, but please honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me, so that I may worship the Lord your God." So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshipped the Lord.
Then Samuel said, "Bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites."
Agag came to him in chains, and he thought, "Surely the bitterness of death is past."
But Samuel said, "As your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be childless among women." And Samuel put Agag to death before the Lord at Gilgal.
Then Samuel left for Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. Until the day Samuel died, he did not go to see Saul again, though Samuel mourned for him. And the Lord regretted that he had made Saul king over Israel.
Chapter 16. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen one of his sons to be king."
But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me."
The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, 'I have come to sacrifice to the Lord.' Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate."
Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?"
Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice.
When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord."
But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart."
Then Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse made Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?"
"There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep."
Samuel said, Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives.
So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features.
Then the Lord said, Rise and anoint him. This is the one.
So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah.
Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him.
Saul's attendant said to him, See, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play the lyre. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better.
So Saul said to his attendants, Find someone who plays well and bring him to me.
One of the servants answered, I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is a brave man and a warrior. He speaks well and is a fine-looking man, and the Lord is with him.
Then Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, Send me your son David, who is with the sheep. So Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and a young goat, and sent them with his son David to Saul.
David came to Saul and entered his service. Saul liked him very much, and David became one of his armor-bearers. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, Allow David to remain in my service, for I am pleased with him.
Whenever the Spirit from God came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Then relief would come to Saul. He would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Just a quick summary of what we've read so far. In chapter 13, we read about Saul's reign over Israel for 42 years and how that Jonathan won victory with the Philistines just with a few men. And again, we read about how that the Israelites were literally without weapons, and it was only Saul and Jonathan that had sword, while the rest had farming instruments. In chapter 14, we read about how Jonathan attacked the Philistines and had victory. And then God sent panic to the whole army, so much that the other Israelites were not able to overpower them and win the battle. And we also read about how that Saul told his men not to eat until he has had victory over his enemy. But Jonathan did not know of this, and he had little honey. We read about that the men were so hungry, they started eating animals with blood still in them. When Saul heard, he then had them do it the right way. Saul had in mind to go and pursue the Philistines again, but when he was inquired of God, God did not say anything. And then Saul tried to find out who had sinned, and Jonathan was taken. And Saul was going to kill him because of the oath he has made, but the men rescued Jonathan, saying, Why would Jonathan die after bringing such a victory to the Israelites? Then at the latter part of that chapter, we read the names of Saul's family. Then in chapter 15, we read about how that the Lord rejected Saul as king because he did not obey the instructions God gave him about the Amalekites. And when Samuel confronted Saul with what he has done, it was evasive. And Samuel said the kingdom has been taken from him. That was when Saul then owned up to say, I have sinned. Then in chapter 16, we read about how that Samuel mourned for Saul, but God told him to stop mourning and go anoint another person whom he has chosen as king. And David was chosen as king. And for some reason, at that appointed time was when an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul, and it was when made David his armor bearer and wanted him to remain in his service because he was pleased with him. It was when David plays his lyre, that is when he finds relief and the spirit will leave him. What stood out to you in chapter 13?
Thank you. In chapter 13, I just began to note what, of course, kept recurring in various ways in the subsequent chapters about the mistakes of Saul. Because I'm asking myself, what exactly is the problem here? How did Saul become what he became? And the first insight I saw was in verse 3 when it says Jonathan attacked the Philistine outpost. But of course, Saul then had the trumpet blown to proclaim that Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost. In other words, Saul took the glory for what his son did. And that is just the beginning. It's like he's so obsessed with this idea of a public image that needs to be sterling and everybody needs to know is the man and is the one in charge. And different other expressions of that would go on and on in why he will feel compelled to offer the burnt offering because the people were scattering, also in that same chapter. So yeah, it just stood out to me that, his obsession with his image probably played a huge role in his downfall.
True. What stood out to me was what he did in verse 15. And now that in 14 he was told that his kingdom would not endure, that God has chosen another man after his own heart as a ruler of his people. And what he did afterwards in 15 was he counted his men, and they were number 600. And I thought, that's weird. You've been told as another person has been appointed ruler over you, and he did not seek to find out what God is saying or how he would do better or anything. And all he did was just count what is left around him. I just found that a bit weird. Yeah.
In chapter 14, I like the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer, and how the two of them somehow, I think there is a sense in which Jonathan, as much as we know of him in the scriptures, there is a sense in which he did not agree with the ways of his father, and also a sense in which he himself is also being led or inspired or moved by the Spirit of God occasionally. Because in breaking away from the rest of the camp, this was what would eventually lead to the victory they had against the Philistines. And that in itself is instructive, how that before they could win, someone had to leave the camp of Saul, in a manner of speaking, before the victory came. But I love the loyalty of his armor bearer. It says in verse 7, do all that you have in mind. His armor bearer said, go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. And it just speaks of someone whose leadership is trusted, unlike Jonathan's father, Saul, whose leadership now is being questioned and people are scattering, and is looking for ways to continue to rally the people around him. But where people see godly leadership, they are willing to go indeed following heart and soul. And that's just instructive to me.
What was instructive to me, or what I found interesting, is that there's a priest with Saul wearing an ephod. Yet he was not aware that Jonathan had left. Just that line, no one was aware Jonathan had left, made me feel like, so what's the priest there for? Was it just for him to wear the ephod and look like a priest, rather than actually be attuned to what God is saying? Because what we've read from priests, like as appointed priests from our previous reading, is how that they have this connection with God and hear God, and God will tell them what's to happen next. Him not being aware that Jonathan had left, or the purpose of what Jonathan was about to do. But for me, a bit of a check, like our priesthood should not just be a design. We're not just there to stand at the king's right hand looking good, but it should be much more of leaning towards God, having his ear, and continually bringing his message to his people.
And on that as well, we do have a better priesthood compared to them, because for us, the Spirit of God resides in us 24/7. But for them in the Old Testament, as much as they were appointed to minister in that office, there is still a whole lot. It's not like they are enjoying that ongoing communion with God as we do. And which is why they needed that Urim and Thummim. The way the Urim and Thummim was described and how it was used here reminds me of African traditional religion, especially in the Yoruba cosmology, what we call Ifa. And people will go and consult Ifa, and they would throw something on the floor, and it is whatever comes out of that thing in terms of how it landed on the floor or the readings they are making from it that helps them to know what is happening. Because that's what is happening here. When Jonathan and Saul were on one side and all the people were on the other side, it was that Tumim and Urim, which God gave them. That was how they found out, okay, no, it's going to be within this group or within that group and things like that. But now we have a better deal, as many as are led by the Spirit of God. So we want to continue to lean in to be sure that we are being led by that Spirit all our days.
The other thing that stood out to me in 14 is Saul's proclamation that nobody should eat until he has avenged himself of his own enemies. And that to me again is troubling, in that the Philistines are not Saul's enemies. They are God's. Yeah, just that. Yeah.
There's that obsession with himself, and it spills over into what then happens next in chapter 15. I found it strange from verse 1 that Samuel had to preface his message to Saul by saying, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. That's already showing us signs that at this point, even Samuel doesn't have as much a standing as he used to have, because now everything is all about Saul. And Samuel had to kind of remind him, I'm the one the Lord sent to anoint you. You didn't find yourself in this position just like that. So whatever I'm saying, at least should still carry that power and that authority that comes from the God who called you and appointed you. But in verse 12, we're told, when Samuel came, it was told Saul has gone to Carmel to set up a monument in his own honor. After outright and blatant disobedience, the next gesture is to go and set up a monument in his own honor. Just every little thing keeps screaming back that obsession with self.
What stood out to me here is how that Saul denied that he did anything wrong. He said he's done everything God has said. But until it was put to him again that the kingdom has been taken out of his hand, that was when he owned up. And that reminds me of what I learned in my discipleship class this week. That once correction comes, we should be people that are able to take correction so that it can transform us. It's not even whether or not the person is right or whether whether we are right. The point is there's always another perspective to any matter. And us being willing to not be defensive help us to hear what the other person is saying. And even if it's not useful for that situation, it might be useful for another situation where we're about to do something. Actually, some other people might think it this way, and it'll give us better wisdom or better perspective on how to handle such situation. And I found Saul here insisting that he did what God has told him to do
when he hasn't.
I found it very troubling, as though he literally believed that what he did was right until it was put to him. And he said he chose the fat calves for sacrifice, but nowhere did we hear that. For your God. And okay, if the animals were taken for burnt sacrifice, what about King Agag? Is he going to sacrifice him as well? It's just very. I know that we're reading Saul's story and his mistakes, and it feels as though, is this bad person? But we too fall into this category sometimes, where we're told to do A and B, but we'll add Z to it, thinking, let me make it holistic, or let me tie it together. The strands needs to be tied. But that is not what we've been told to do. If it's just A and B, let's just stick to that. Because we've seen here that Saul did the same. He thought to do better or above what God has said, and it resulted in something huge. Yeah.
Thank you. In chapter 16, I love how that immediately in verse 7 it says, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. Because in verse 6 it says, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here. And that tells me, again, the fickleness of how we can easily judge things by our sight. If you remember, on the day of the confirmation of the appointment and coronation of Saul, Bible says when they after they got him out from where he was hiding amongst the baggage, he stood a head and shoulder taller than everyone else. And when Samuel saw him, he made a comment to that just by the appearance of Saul to say, this is the one the Lord has anointed. There is a part of Samuel's judgment that is clouded with just physicalities. But God is bringing a corrective here, because when he saw Eliab, the same thing kicked in and said, oh wow, surely this is the one the Lord has anointed. But then the Lord said, no, don't consider his appearance. The Lord does not look at things the way we look at them. And I think that's very, very instructive.
The one that stood out to me in chapter 16 is how that Jesse had his 7 sons pass before Samuel and didn't choose to send someone to go call David until he was asked, are these all the sons you have? Does that mean he doesn't recognize David as a son? I know I've heard this part being preached over and over, but it still baffles me. 7 passed over, and you had to be asked if this is all you have before you remember, oh, they're still the youngest. Even the way it said it was very dismissive. Like, oh, it's just standing the ship. That's his work. It's working. While the 7 was a prime not to work. That's interesting. And the other part that stood out to me, every time I've heard about this part of the Bible being preached, or I just read it out of context, the picture in my head is Samuel went to Jesse's house, just him, the father, and the 7 sons. Each one passed before him, and then until the question was asked, and David was brought in. I did not realize that the elders were also there. I did not realize it was a public thing that was done. Verse 4. When Samuel came and the elders of the town met him, they said, have you come in peace? And then Samuel said, yes. Come, consecrate yourself and come to the sacrifice with me. And then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, so it flows through like from that same sacrifice. When they arrived, when the sons and Jesse, instead of the reading we've always known that Samuel went to their house, it was Jesse and his sons that came to where the sacrifice was being made, and then they passed before Samuel and they said, these ones have not been chosen. And then David was sent for. And I thought, because the erratic nature of how Saul was at the moment with the Hebrew spirit and everything, I thought, if God would anoint David at that time, is that not like a license to kill? Because even Samuel was afraid of Saul at the time. So if it was a public thing, God is a very strategic person. Still heeds him in the same guise. It's quite interesting.
That's interesting. I've never read it like that before, myself as well, and of course all the movies that have tried to portray this scene. But I'm wondering whether there is the possibility that Samuel just used the sacrifice as an occasion to actually then get up close and personal with Jesse and his sons. But how the whole thing plays out, where was the sacrifice holding? Where was this conversation about we will not sit down until your last born comes here? Where was that happening? I think those details, we can have different readings of it just looking at the passage. But yeah, it's a very interesting thought that it flows from the passage as though everything just happened in the presence of that public audience. That would be quite interesting. I like that the very first description of David that was mentioned in the Bible was not even his name in verse 12. They sent for him. All this why they haven't told us his name. They sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health.
I like that
and
part.
had a fine appearance and handsome features. And then the Lord said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. We don't even need to know his name. Just seeing him glowing with health, fine appearance, handsome features. I was like, yeah. So we'll turn the page and begin to see more about David. Tomorrow, day 85, we'll be reading Psalm 23, arguably the most popular Psalm of David. But till then, just remember,
you're not alone
today.
God bless you.